football as a kid and being asked to come out and, play kick the can back in the day. And as we all got older and they got
Hmm.
girlfriends, their girlfriends didn't like the relationship that I had
Hmm.
as one of the guys. So
So,
it was an eye-opening experience to say the least.
so what, I mean, for someone that has been in that position, or even necessarily even right now, who is a young Kimberlin Brown trying to find her way, what advice would you give to them if they were going through what you were going through? What advice would you leave for them?
I would say do what I did. Don't lower yourself to their level, because when you do, you lower your vibration. We all operate on vibrations in life. I truly believe that.
Hmm.
And the higher you keep yours, the more difficult it is for them to drag you down. And remember, it takes a lot more energy to be nasty and negative and
Hmm.
degrade people that you really know nothing about,
Hmm.
just to fit in to a group. I was never part of a group,
Yeah, same.
and I would recommend that you do the same. Be your own person and forge your own way. Of course, you're going to have friendships, but when you're surrounded by people that are negative, that'll rub off on you. And those negative people are only being that way because they're trying to drag you down to their level. So don't let that happen.
Good advice. So like when you first made that jump, to Los Angeles, and obviously, in the business, you don't necessarily hear or see or find models that have had the success as a crossover from a model to an actress as you've done. Did you find when you started, did you find that transition, number one, harder from the modeling to get into the acting? And two, did you find yourself, what's the word, necessarily, looking at, is this something that I could possibly do as a career? Or did you just have like still those doubts and those self-doubts within yourself?
Um, I actually, at one point, I was so excited about the acting, and it was an easy transition for me only because an actress friend of mine, Claudia Christian, that I met when I was doing one of those five and under lines,
Okay.
she told me, I want to introduce you to my agent, my acting agent, who was Vicky
Okay.
Light. Vicky Light was amazing for me, absolutely amazing. She believed in me, and it was always coming down to myself and headliner. So
Hmm.
it's only a matter of time before that ceiling breaks, and you're propelled forward, as we all know.
Hmm.
Um, and then Vicky unfortunately became very ill, and she merged her agency with a couple of gals from New York. And when that happened, they brought all of their own people with them. And I went from, 3 to 4 interviews, 5 interviews sometimes a week, to nothing.
Hmm.
So I decided to get out of acting. Um, I was going to go back to school. My first love was always architecture, and
Okay.
I wanted to be an architect. So I was going to go back to school to become an architect because it's a long degree program, just like a
Hmm.
doctor. And I was going to sell real estate in the meantime to get myself through school.
Okay.
And the phone rang, and it just happened to be Jill Newton, head of casting from Young and the Restless, in the late '80s,
Hmm.
early '90s. And I had screen tested for the part of Cassandra Rawlings on Young and the Restless
Great
three
character.
years, yeah, 3 years earlier. And I didn't get the part, but she called me and she said, "Hey, there's this part. I think it'll be perfect for you. Will you come in?" And I didn't even have an agent at the time because
Hmm.
I left my agency. And
Do you remember where you were in that moment? Like where you were when you got that call?
I was living in Pasadena in my apartment, um, figuring out what I was going to
Hmm.
do. I literally went into Nina Blanchard Agency probably 2 weeks before and
Hmm.
told her that I was going to be stopping, that I was going to go back to school and become an architect. And she basically told me, well, if you leave, you'll never work again if you leave me in this business in this town. And I was willing to take that gamble and take that shot because architecture has always been a love of mine,
Mm-hmm.
always. So I did. I left Nina Blanchard. I left my acting agent, and then I went to see, I had an interview with Harry Abrams, of all people, because Nina Pakula, who was my agent with Nina at the light company, Vicky Light, had gone there.
Okay.
And I went there and I was excited about that opportunity. And Nina wanted me. Joel King was there, who was also with the light company at the time. And it's probably politically incorrect for me to name names, but this is a true story, and
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be heard. And this is what these people did to me. Nina Bakula wanted me. She brought me in, asked me to come in to Abrams, and I said yes, and I was excited about the opportunity because I'm loyal. I am
Mm-hmm.
loyal, sometimes to a fault.
Same.
And I wanted to give Vicky Light and the light company that opportunity to show that they could still work for me
Okay.
the way that they used to. And when I realized they couldn't, Nina called. I said yes, I would go in. I met with Joel, and Joel looked at me and he said, "Are you sure acting is what you want to do?" And it's like I looked at him and it's like, "Well, that's why I'm here."
Mm-hmm.
"Well, it's such a hard business, and you might want to think of something else." And it's like, wow, you were my agent at the last agency and you saw how much I worked,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what you're telling me?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went in to meet with Harry, he said, had you come with me when Nina first asked you to come, I would have taken you. But let this be a lesson to you. When somebody works for you and they want you, you go. I would have taken you then. I'm not taking you now. And I went, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So glad that I came in to see you. And I got the call 3 weeks later to go on Young and the Restless. And that would have been a nice contract that Abrams could have negotiated for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I think, like I said, keeping that high energy, that high vibration, it pays off at the end of the day. Those who put out that low vibration, that stuff's taken away from them. And that's exactly what happened in this case.
Well, I always believe that, a lot of times, look, as you know, this journey in this business, it's a bumpy one. And I always believe that, like, when you have either those setbacks or those people that are trying to put those roadblocks in front of you,
Yeah.
that to me, I don't look at it as a bad thing. I look at it as that it just wasn't your time.
Yeah.
Because you could have necessarily, as you said, you could have negotiated, you could have stayed, you could have done whatever earlier on, and either A, the opportunities may have been presented to you where you weren't ready, where, for example, you
Mm-hmm.
could have been casted as Sheila Carter, but as you know, soaps and actresses are revolving doors. There's many actresses that who are on a show now, 20 years later, but didn't start off as the original
Yeah.
character. So I look at it, that to me there's a sense of timing involved with everything, and I believe that that was a time for you to. And I wouldn't say that necessarily like make your break, because I think you already were making your break, but I think
Right.
it was a time for you to sort of prove. I believe in those situations, if you look at it from a different standpoint, is you're a fighter, because most people would have cracked under that. They wouldn't.
Yeah.
You've already seen the bullshit. You already saw all the things that, like, what the business was.
Yeah.
And when you came
Yes.
into that moment, you're like, okay, you know what? I was already done with this shit. Like, I was already out the door. So there's really nothing you can throw at me at
Right.
this point that's actually gonna, like, slow me down. And if you're gonna give me this opportunity, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna definitely show you now what necessarily, even for you, where if there was any doubts from them in the past,
Mm-hmm.
there's no doubts now, because here you are 30 years later.
Yeah. Well, and let me tell you what, it was that last experience when I went in for that interview
Mm-hmm.
that really said, well, that's it. Then I'm getting out. I'm getting out. I'm going back to school. It helped me make up my mind, and it separated me, and I stepped away. And then when that phone rang for me to come back, and I told Jill, you know what, I'm going back to school. The timing's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, well, what are you going to study? And I told her, and she said, Kimberlin, she goes, this will pay for your schooling. She goes, it's only 3 months and it will pay for school. You won't even have to sell real estate. And I said, okay, I'll come in. I'll come in and I'll read for that part. And I studied the lines. You know, I studied under great people, Catherine Daly, Creative Actors Workshop, and Scott Arthur Allen, rest his soul. And they always taught me to go in completely prepared, have it memorized, don't read it off the page, have the page there in case you need it, but give them a performance. Don't
Mm-hmm.
just give them a reading. So I did that, and they had Peter Barton, who played Scott
Okay. Yeah.
at the time, who was Lauren's love interest on the show, and he was there reading with me. It was Bill Bell, executive producer Ed Scott,
Mm-hmm.
writers, other producers, and I went in and I did the performance, and I got in my car and headed home and realized I dropped the entire middle of the scene, Dee. I mean, it was like, oh my God. It's like, what did I do? I can't believe it. And I didn't even realize it. I didn't, because everything flowed. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even realize it. So I called Gail Camacho, who was assisting in casting at the time, on my drive home, apologizing and asking her if there was an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for me to turn around and come back. And she let me apologize for like 20 minutes. And then she said, oh, and by the way, you got the part. So it was like,
Wow.
yeah. And it life altering. 3 months has turned into 33 years.
Which is incredible, which is completely incredible. I mean, obviously, like, you know, we already know, and people, the viewers that may not know, you know how fast, obviously, the pace in daytime is. I consider it legitimately the hardest medium. I mean, I don't even know, honestly, how you guys do it. Me being a primetime guy, and I'm like, I love you guys in daytime, but I'm like, that's a lot of dialogue. So, like, for you, what is your tip or something that you do that helped you memorize so much dialogue, obviously, to get it all done in one take, where, you know, obviously in primetime in film, you have a lot more leisure and you don't have that option in daytime. Did you find that medium hard to adapt, to be able to get your lines and know them and absorb all that dialogue, or did you find it hard? And what was your process?
Well, first off, to give people an idea of what you're talking about, I mean, when
Mm-hmm.
Dee does prime time, and when I was started out doing prime time, you might do 7 pages in a
Mm-hmm.
day, and we're shooting, you know, 38 to 42 pages in a day, and a lot of times 22 of those pages will be mine alone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of back to that muscle again. You know, the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. It used to be I could memorize. It would take me, you know, like 3 hours,
Mm-hmm.
4 hours to memorize all of my dialogue for a day on the soap.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can literally, if it's only like 4 or 5 scenes, I can memorize all of that in less than an hour
Okay.
now. But I also know my character. You know, I've had the luxury of creating her with you know, Bill Bell Sr., and he always told me there was no wrong. There was nothing wrong that Sheila could do. She was the kind of character that could get away with doing things that nobody else could. And he said, Kimberlin, don't ever play her safe. Please keep her interesting. Don't ever play her safe. So I have that luxury when I'm memorizing my lines as well, Dee, because I keep coming up with just some crazy little wild things in my head to keep things
Mm-hmm.
interesting. So it makes it exciting for me still
So,
after
so
30 years.
here's a question then in regards to that. Like,
Yeah.
what do you find more important? The believability of the character, whether, because obviously, as you know, sometimes you'll get a shitty script. Like, it's just That just happens in the business. You get a script and you're like, what the hell am I reading here? And you have
Yeah.
to obviously try to make it work. But for you, what do you find more important, the believability in the character or the script?
I, for me, the character has to be believable. And what I do is I take that script,
Mm-hmm.
and I do the best with it that I possibly can. I take their words and I do my best to make them believable for Sheila.
Okay.
And if that means I've got to create some sort of a backstory in my mind to make those things work, that's what I do. For me, my character, and I think the reason why she's had such great longevity is because people do feel sorry for her.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of made her that way. She can be incredibly evil, but people feel sorry for her because all she has ever wanted is to be
Loved.
loved
Mm-hmm.
and accepted. And
Don't
there
we
have
all?
always, yeah, and there are those people that have never allowed her to reach that plateau, to be that happy, to find that
Mm-hmm.
happiness and hold on to it. And when she has found it and had it in her hand, they've wanted to take it away from her.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that kind of still reminds me of what we talked about earlier, the things that I experienced growing up in high
Mm-hmm.
school. Those people that didn't want to see you succeed,
Mm-hmm.
those people that refused to let you be happy. A lot of that is still happening with my character today, not with Kimberlin, because
Mm-hmm.
Kimberlin
Kimberly's
is
good.
Kimberlin is good. Kimberlin is rocking it. I mean, she has found herself. So it's neat though to be able to draw sometimes from the you the line that has gone through my life
Mm-hmm.
and bring it to where I'm at today.
Well, I mean, you've obviously, you've worked with some power players, let alone my sister, Catherine Kelly Lang,
Yeah.
John McCook, a lot of power players in the business. Did you feel when you first, I mean, even in the heydays of the 90s of Y&R and B&B, did you ever feel intimidation at all when you first stepped onto that set to, with the legacy and the history, to be able to say, you know what, like maybe take a step back in that moment and say like, wow, like I'm a part of something that has been so monumental. Did you ever feel any bit of intimidation or level of pressure to make sure that you always are bringing your A game with the people that you're working with?
Well, first off, I always try to bring my A game no matter what. Like we talked about, once you burn that bridge, you don't go back over it. And
Mm-hmm.
daytime is such a fast moving medium as you talked about that you really don't have time to or the luxury to to ponder and take your time and try to make it the best. You have to try to make it the best right out the gate. Of course, I was definitely intimidated. I grew up watching Young and the Restless with my
Mm-hmm.
mom. She was a CBS woman, and it was As the World Turns, and Guiding Light, and
Mm-hmm.
Young and the Restless. And when I had that opportunity to be on the show, I was a fan of the show myself. I grew
Mm-hmm.
up watching it with my mom, and when I knew I was working with Lauren Fenmore of all people, it was like, wow, I'm being thrown right into the fire. This is this
Mm-hmm.
is exciting. So, there's that level of intimidation because I hadn't worked in daytime in that fast-paced environment before, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew I had to step up my game coming from television and feature films. And I took it head on. I enjoyed it. I memorized my work. I was set. I was ready to go. And everyone behind the scenes
Mm-hmm.
who may have sensed my fear, if any, made me feel right at home. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I I became quick friends with everyone behind the camera, and I also find that part of the business extremely
Important
fascinating.
and important too.
Absolutely fascinating. Hit your marks. Make sure you're there for your lighting people, for your sound people, for your camera people. because in daytime, time is money.
Hmm.
As in any production, time is money. But in daytime, we don't have that luxury of 10 takes. You're lucky if you get two. You're blessed if you get three.
Do you remember who you shared your very first scene with when you came on Young and the Restless, and as well B&B?
Um, Young and the Restless, it was, I believe, with Scott,
Okay.
Scott Granger, and um, then Lauren walked in. And then on Bold and the Beautiful, it was with John McCook when I made that phone call with the iconic crossover from Young and the Restless to Bold and the Beautiful, looking for a job in LA. And he just happened to answer his own phone because his secretary stepped out. I know.
What do you, I mean,
Crazy,
what,
crazy, right?
definitely, what do you feel though, like has been for you? Why do you think the legacy, obviously, of this character being so iconic, what do you think that, you know, has been your key, not only to Sheila Carter, but to just you in general in the business, your longevity?
Boy, I um I would just have to say playing it real, being real, and having your fans accept that character and feel for her and want for her and wanting to see her succeed. You know, I Kimberlin
Hmm.
want to see Sheila succeed, and I Kimberlin as an actress want to succeed. Back to that competitive nature,
Hmm.
truly, truly, and work ethic and working hard and having it pay off. And I'm blessed that I've got the fans that I have. I truly am. Even the ones that message me on a regular basis saying, "Oh, I can't stand you. I can't stand Sheila." But boy, I love the way
You
you
know you're
play
doing your
her.
job. You know you're
Yeah,
doing your job when you do that.
yeah. But I love the way you're playing her. So I'm doing something right, Dee, and I'm, always trying to be inventive, always
Hmm.
trying to spice it up, keep it interesting, keep it fun. I mean, this latest go around with Sean Kanan
Hmm.
has been a complete game changer because when they first started writing for us, I noticed that they were writing the same sort of way that they did with Mike Guthrie on the show,
Hmm.
played by Ken Haynes. And I had a great conversation with Sean saying, I want it to be different. I
Hmm.
want my relationship with you to be different than it has been with anybody else that I've ever acted with on the show.
Hmm.
And he said, absolutely, let's do this. And we both jumped in, head first, and we were able to laugh and be
Hmm.
funny. Things
That's
things our
Sean.
char- things our characters were never allowed to do before,
Hmm.
but we were allowed to do them with each other.
Hmm.
So I think, a big part of being an actor, especially after playing this character for 33 years, is to try and constantly come up with something that is inventive and new.
Well, as I told you when, you know, we had that conversation privately when I said to you when you came back, you know, you to me, just because of the way that the show had been written for so long, as you said, like a lot of the same sort of things over and over again, and you came in and you gave the show this bolt of electricity that was, I mean, literally, Catherine had that bolt and then they took it away, which pissed me off. And then you were gone, and then you came back, and then all of a sudden, you know, the electricity came back again. Were you expecting or surprised by that call? And were you also, you know, surprised by how the fans and everybody else reacted and gave you such obviously a warm reception back, which led to obviously, as you know, some of your best work, which landed you an Emmy, which hands down we already know. As I've told you privately, you won regardless. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care what the Academy thinks. they got it wrong. They always get it wrong. They will always continue to get it wrong because Catherine should have won it 5 years ago. Sharon should have won it 5 years before that. This was your time. So for you coming back after so long, was it a surprise call for you to get that call from Brad Bell? Or was it something that you were like, you know what, you always knew that some way or shape or form, I'm going to get that call one more again?
No, it was a surprise call. I had actually been asked, Casey Krzyzewski, the executive producer on our show.
Okay.
Um, he had called and asked me to come in for an interview, and it was during COVID, so everything was locked down. But they wanted me to come to CBS to do an interview for Channel 10 in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
The host, Angela Bishop on that show, had requested that I be there, and I said, absolutely, of course I would. And, I hadn't worked in a while. I had a severe injury that had me
That's
bedridden
right.
for half a
Going to
year.
get
And
into it. Yeah, I want to get into
yeah,
that.
gained a ton of weight and figured out how I could kind of disguise this as I said yes. And, went to CBS, did this interview, and she asked me at the end of her interview, she said, Kimberlin, if the show asked you to come back, would you? And I said, absolutely, I would. I said, Sheila is my baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I would never say no to playing Sheila. And she said, well, we certainly hope they ask you because all of Australia wants you back. And I don't know if that sparked something. 2 weeks later, I received that phone call from Brad Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, when you're my age, the phone doesn't ring as often as it used to. And you think that you're probably definitely in the twilight of your career and lucky if that phone rings. And I definitely was. I was blessed because that's exactly what happened.
Well, do you feel that, I mean, do you feel obviously that, because I know before you got that call, you were obviously decided to sort of change directions in the sense of your path and career aspect, and you got into the political aspect, which we'll get into, where you ran for office. What was your decision making, and why did you choose to do that?
To run for office.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what a lot of people don't know about me is I actually put my money to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother, who was a brilliant woman, always told me to diversify. She said, you never know where your next paycheck is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the money I made early on in my career and I invested in companies that I started with my husband in San
Mm-hmm.
Diego. And I employ, during the summer, roughly 240 people.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then during the rest of the year, off season, I employ, over 160. And I had employees coming to me, asking me, where their money was going. They were really concerned about their health care because
Mm-hmm.
I provided health care to all of my employees and they had really good coverage. And when certain health care initiatives were enforced, it changed everything for them. And they felt like they didn't have anyone fighting for them. So, I'm the kind of person, I don't care what party you're
Mm-hmm.
with. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you're an independent.
Mm-hmm.
I will back you 100% as long as you're doing what's right for the
Mm-hmm.
people that voted for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt in the district that I was registered to vote in that representative wasn't representing our district.
Okay.
And what definitely wasn't doing it in an honest fashion. And I'm from a business mindset where you do your research on the company, you check the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
you check the books, you check the balance sheets,
Mm-hmm.
and you go from there. And when I checked, the record, and I checked the voting, and I checked all of the things that were done by the person I was running against, I realized that they had really done
Mhm.
nothing. And I decided to throw my hat in the arena and give it a shot because I knew that my employees weren't the only ones out there that needed the help.
Listen, man, like Obama used to say, you can either stand in the bleachers and chirp, we can get
Yeah,
into the game and play, and
yeah,
my hat's off to you because a lot of people, they don't do that. They stand from a distance and say, well, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I don't like that, and I don't like that, and this person is gonna, and it's like, at the end of the day, I've always said, it doesn't matter who's in office, doesn't matter who's at the top. People are gonna find some reason to bitch and complain and find something wrong with that person who's in charge or that person not helping out enough.
right.
But I still say to people, like, you can stand there and bitch, or you can get into the game. You can get your hands dirty, and the fact that you're doing that, to me is a testament not just you as a woman, but your character, because many people do it for the wrong reasons. They just want that. They're addicted to power. And I could see with what you did, obviously, as you said, taking care of your workers and making sure they've got health care. This brings my point then. What do you feel, obviously, as you've seen, because you said, as you get older, things change in our business. And as you've obviously seen and known the changes in SAG, we pay all these freaking union fees for decades. And then now people who are, in a senior citizen aspect are getting those things taken away. What's your thoughts on that? And what do you feel that should be done to make it, better for people, number one? Because again, we give our lives to this business. We're away from our families. We're away from, birthdays and all that other things when you have kids and things of that nature. So what do you feel in regards to that could be done to make the industry better and the changes that need to be made for SAG? What do you think for that?
Well, once again, my business hat on. AFTRA and Screen Actors Guild, they rent the majority of the buildings and have for decades without
Mm-hmm.
owning them. It's always smarter to own your own building than you at least have an investment
Mm-hmm.
there as well. But our union, much like the government, has grown so much that streamlining, I think, is definitely necessary. But like the government, once something is implemented, it's something that they never want to cut
Mm-hmm.
because somebody's going to lose their job.
Mm-hmm.
But in the interest of keeping our future benefits that I've worked, over 30 years for, I've worked, well, I started acting when I was doing commercial work with SAG and all the rest when I was
Mm-hmm.
like 18, 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
There's another actress on my show that came to me, I want to say probably around 2017 with major concerns and complaints because the other thing is the higher ups in our union don't want to answer the
Mm-hmm.
questions, the tough questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because they don't know the answers personally. But when you're an actor who's been paying your dues towards your retirement
Mm-hmm.
as long as you have, and you're going to be lucky if you get half of what you were supposed to get in your retirement now, the
Mm-hmm.
way our union is being operated. And yet if you are a board member who served one term, you're retiring with a six-figure a year pension, things really need to be looked at, and they need to be looked at closely. And we've got so many of those people in those higher places that I'm not sure everybody's needed any longer, D. But
Yeah.
until I would be able to open up the books and take a close look at where the money is being spent,
Mm-hmm.
I also don't believe it's fair for our union to be so political. They're supposed to be there for their union members
Mm-hmm.
and to help their union members,
Yep.
not to throw their hat into a political arena
Mm-hmm.
that has nothing to do with 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 our business at all.
Yeah, because you want to know where
So,
this money's gone. Like, where all these fees that we spent? Where is it gone to?
mhm.
What is it being? Because to me, if it's not being used for our retirement and healthcare, then where is it? Like
Exactly.
where, and it doesn't seem that they want to give that answer, which to me is
Mm-mm.
it's very sad. And this is where it gets to my point, my next point. Like obviously, you being in the business for so long, me being in the business for so long, but we've seen the ups and the downs, and especially for you, obviously in daytime. When daytime, early '80s, '90s, it was massive. You know, you had all these different shows, and obviously over the years, you know, things have changed and things have gotten smaller, and now we're really down to what, three shows really? General Hospital, Bold and the Beautiful, Young and the Restless. I don't even know if Days of Our Lives is even still on. Do you feel, as a person who's been in daytime for so long, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, being in the era of Bill Bell, because Bill Bell didn't give a shit. He did what he wanted to do, and he made his decisions that were best for the show and for the characters. And then obviously, you know, the game has changed where it's now more, as you say, in a political aspect where it's more corporate and there's more foods up the chain and things of that nature. Do you feel that networks now, especially when you talked about streaming and things of that nature, do you feel that networks meddle too much in the affairs of the reason why these shows are declining so much? Because, for example, like you could have a show that you put your blood, sweat, and tears into, and you know it's going to be a great show, but then it's like there's almost, as you say, this fast pace where there's not an option to really build a storyline, to build a character, to build that intensity where people say, hey, I mess with that show. Now it's like if you don't put out a billion ratings and billion numbers in 2 episodes, that show gets canceled, doesn't even get given a chance by the network. So do you feel that networks, compared to when you started, meddle too much in the affairs of letting shows just be the way they should be compared to when you started?
You know, I think networks have always meddled on some level,
Mm-hmm.
quite honestly. But I do think that they used to give shows an opportunity to succeed a little longer
Mm-hmm.
than they do in today's market. You know, daytime, it's interesting. There was an article that came out, I want to say 2, 3 months ago, that actually applauded the four remaining daytime shows that were still on the air. You
Mm-hmm.
know, daytime was crushed by reality TV.
Mm-hmm.
It became far more profitable for studios to throw out reality TV because they were not considered contract players. So they didn't have to pay, you
As
know,
much.
the as much, and they didn't have to pay the union part as much, or if any, because they weren't considered contract players. Although now you look at reality TV and it's the same cast every single season. And I still don't know if they have to pay into the union the way that I do. Those are questions, like I said, if I were to open the book, I would be taking a hard look at that.
Mm-hmm.
AFTRA used to be all daytime TV, news media as well. Yet there are certain news media outlets that are exempted from paying into our union. I'd like to
Mm-hmm.
know why that is the case. I mean, if we have a union that is starting to decline and lose money, perhaps they should revisit those people who are in our union, who are making fantastic paychecks, that are not
Mm-hmm.
paying into our union and are exempt, and as to why. Studio heads, though, back to um, your question, you know, Les Moonves, he was a numbers person, and
Mm-hmm.
he looked at the data, and I believe that's why Bold and the Beautiful and Young and the Restless still remain at CBS today, because he saw an audience that, regardless of what reality TV did,
Mm-hmm.
was succeeding. It was not at the point of failure. And now our numbers are coming back even
Mm-hmm.
stronger. And
Mm-hmm.
this article that I read, like I said, 2, 3 months ago, said that those that have survived are are ruling daytime yet again. And
Do you think? I mean, do you think? I mean, for me, sorry to cut you off, but do you think
yeah,
like with that? Like I've always believed, and just seeing the way that daytime, especially especially Young and the Restless and Bold and Beautiful is obviously being a half-hour show. I feel, and I want to know what your thoughts are, if both shows were switched to prime time, like being on in the evening at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, do you feel that would make a better impact in the sense of numbers and just, of course, profit than staying in daytime?
You know that that's a hard one for me to answer. I can tell you, Bold and the Beautiful is a primetime show all over.
Mm-hmm.
Every Bold and the Beautiful, for the viewers that are watching that don't know, Bold and the Beautiful is the number one show globally,
Mm-hmm.
and it is prime time in all of these other countries. It's a daytime show here in the United States, um, but boy, the primetime market right now is so saturated
Mm-hmm.
that to move a daytime show to primetime, it would be risky, but it it it, it quite possibly could
Because here's my thing. Here's
be
my thing. This is
like a dynasty, right? Or yeah, I
well
get what you're saying.
to me,
Dynasty,
yeah.
Dallasy,
Mm-hmm.
those were primetime soap operas.
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, I mean, for me, if I was to get that job, which I am lobbying for, to be an executive, to be the first Black executive in either show or CBS itself. But for me, if I had that decision making, I would move it to prime time. But what I would do is I would make, just as you have had the chance to obviously do crossovers, I would make Bold and the Beautiful, Young and the Restless as a full crossover show, where almost like when you see the Chicago, like as sort of like how NBC does with Dick Wolf, where he
Mm-hmm.
builds these franchise shows around the players, and then they intertwine, they mingle, and to me, if you do that in a way, it gives not only more strength to storyline, but I think in the sense of giving the show a little bit more depth. You can get away with a little. I mean, because I personally think Sheila Carter's character is just too. I mean, imagine her in prime time. Like, imagine the things that she could do and get away in prime time that you can't do in daytime. And for you, as I said, you've worked on both spectrums of the ship. There's two-part question I'm going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you find for you the differences in working for Bill Bell compared to working for Brad Bell?
Wow. Um, Bill Bell, Bill Bell always planned storyline 2 to 3 years ahead. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he had entire arcs that were so thought out. Um, but in today's market, everything is moving much faster, and it had to pick up pace due to the reality TV show market.
Mm-hmm.
So Brad has literally had to adjust a model that worked for generations to a model that works for today and for right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's actually done a beautiful job with it. I really do. He's carrying on a legacy, and it's a huge legacy, as you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think many people could have succeeded with. And one of the benefits to Bold and the Beautiful, like you were saying earlier, with big corporate, companies like Sony Pictures
Mm-hmm.
and CBS and all the rest, is, Bold and the Beautiful is still family owned. So
Mm-hmm.
they really have a say as to what they do on their show
Mm-hmm.
without being dictated from a studio
Okay.
as to what they want. So I'm really fortunate to be involved in that kind of a company in daytime, because a lot of actors that I talk to out there, it's very driven by what's happening in society today and what they feel that they have to add to the show to make everybody happy.
Mm-hmm.
Our show adds what is needed to make a show succeed. versus adding a storyline that might make a studio exec or certain group of people happy.
For you, what would you say in, your 30 years and just your time per se on either show? I'll give you a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say for you has been your most memorable moment on YNR and on B&B?
My most memorable moment
Mm-hmm.
on Young and the Restless was when I received a script instructing me to cut a birthmark off a baby. Yeah, I know.
That's what I fell in love with you, by the way. Literally, it's when
Oh,
I fell in love. That's legitimately, ladies and gentlemen,
thank
that's
you.
when this woman won my heart. Because I'm going, you know what? When a woman is that beautiful but that crazy, to be able to do something of that nature, that's love at first sight, ladies and gentlemen, right there. That woman is full of passion. That woman's full of fire. So from that day point on, I was rooting for you every day, man.
Well, thank you. It was interesting. I got that script and I actually called Ed Scott upstairs. I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Absolutely, we are." And I said, "Ed, my God, people are going to hate me." And he said, "No, no, no, it'll be good. It'll be good. The way it's being shot, it'll be good." I said, "Okay, okay." So we taped it. It aired, and then the hate calls started coming in to the studio, and I got that call from Ed Scott saying, "You might want to lay low for a couple of weeks and just stay home for a couple of weeks." I said, "Okay, sounds good." But once again, that initial show where it aired, where I cut the birthmark off the baby
Mm-hmm.
and then loved that baby so much, and once again, only wanted to be loved and was willing to do anything to get that love from the man that I cared about. People started feeling sorry for my character, and
See, see, for me, my
obviously, you did too.
I mean, it was that, and I mean, where I like, I think the only, I mean, it was a great story. It was a great moment. I look at MTV, but for me, the one that stands out, besides your infamous cat fights and things of that nature, was the scene in the barn with your mother and
Oh
Tracy.
yeah.
Like that to me, I believe was like from a from a writer standpoint, from a producer standpoint, it was the more to me. I look at that the most defining moment for Sheila. Like I look at that was the most because you could see the pain when you were delivering your lines and when she was talking to her mother, and you could feel. I think what everyone goes through in life, you want that approval, you want that love, and I think when people blame Sheila for all the things. I said I've never looked at her as evil. I've never looked at her as somebody, number one, that was crazy. I looked at her as someone that had a lot of passion. She had a lot of love. She was misunderstood. And when you are in a situation where people are automatically going to think the worst of you, that's why she could do no wrong. And that's why it's like you already think that of me. And even if I do something good, just like when you saved Chris Allen off from killing herself on the show,
Yeah.
and still people will
There's
find a way to.
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference. It's kind of like when I shot Steffi and she
Mhm.
survived. I mean, everyone has forgotten Steffi shot Sheila, and Sheila didn't go to the authorities because Eric asked her not to, and because of her love for Eric, she never turned Steffi in. So it's yeah, yeah, it is interesting. Sheila will do pretty much anything for the people that she loves, and she's proven it time and time and time again. And the reciprocation is just it's just not been there. Poor thing.
Like for you, I mean, you you have been such a force. I mean, to me, as I said, in not just in daytime, but as I said, I put you up there with that Mount Rushmore of Helen Mirren, Catherine Kelly Lang. Uh, I'm going to put you next to Meryl Streep. I'm going to put you up there as like the Mecca. And obviously, you have worked in all spectrums from film. I know you obviously did with another person that we know and have in common, Tom Sizemore, who passed away, which is absolutely terrible. I want to know first, how was your experience working with him, but also, what did you find between working in daytime, working in prime time, working in film, for you, the harder medium, and what did you enjoy more between the three?
You know, I was always one of those actors. I was taught by my acting coach there are only two kinds of acting, and that's acting and not acting.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, there were no parts that were too small, and there were no jobs that were too small for me. I love film because you have the luxury of time. I could only imagine what I could do with my character if I had the luxury of time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I could shoot 7 pages in a day, I can only imagine how much richer my performances could possibly be.
Which is why I said I want to
Truly.
move. I would move it to prime time to give characters a depth to do things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to get away with
Yeah.
in daytime. And I think same for you, like, because I honestly say with you, like, not only did they win the lottery, like B&B, wine and art, but like the contribution. And as I said, like, there's three individuals who I love, including you, who are friends: Sharon Case, Catherine Carol Lang, and you. Like, to me, you guys are a staple of what an actress, of what I look at, of the golden era of television, that you bring depth to a story, you bring layers to a character. It doesn't matter what script is thrown in front of you, even if it's a crappy script or a boring script or whatever, you some way find a way to make it your own. And you never play, to me, the same way twice. You never approach the scene the same way. And I'm like, and it's always sort of mind baffled me with your guys' talents. Why, even for you, I ask you the question, why stick with daytime for as long as you have, when obviously there's so many other opportunities out there for you to jump into? Why stick at daytime?
Daytime was a good place for me to be because it allowed me to be a stay-home mom.
Okay.
I had a choice to make, and that was continue with movies or become that architect that I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And then when this came about and it became so successful, it made it great because I could go home after work and cook dinner for my family and
Mm-hmm.
play with the kids, and I could have my kids with me at work in my dressing room, with my help while I was working. And then there's a little bit of a stigma in the acting world
Mm-hmm.
if you're a daytime actor. Um, a lot of primetime people don't want to look at you because, oh, you're a daytime
Which I think is bullshit.
actor.
Straight up think it's
Well,
bullshit. Because
and
you guys
and
are in the hardest medium ever.
and if you look at the people who have come from daytime, I mean, you've got your Tommy Lee Jones, your
Mm-hmm.
Kathy Bates, you've got your Brad Pitt, you've got,
Paul Walker,
oh yeah,
rest
you've
in
got
peace.
you've got all of these major primetime and feature film people that came from daytime, and somebody had to give them a break. Look at Shamar Moore and
Mm-hmm.
the success. Now, talk about a great success. CBS taking someone so popular from a daytime show and putting them in a CBS primetime show.
Mm-hmm.
That's a perfect example right there. And when you look at oh, blanking Drusilla,
Victoria Rowell.
Victoria Rao, yes. I'm sorry, I just saw her too. She's a friend of mine. Look at her success going from that to diagnosis murder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were certain people that had that opportunity, but a lot of it depends on the agent you have, and And a lot of packaging goes on in Hollywood, as
Mm-hmm.
you know. I mean, when you see casting by CSA, and basically, you know, they use all their own actors in a lot of their things that they're casting, and obviously it's smart business decision.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have business people who tell me, Kimberlin, if you own this company, you want to create this company to support this
Mm-hmm.
company, and it's a smart thing. It's what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. But I'm not with one of those agents, so um, I a lot of it, D, is my own fault because I had been told for so many years, you know, you're a daytime actress,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to do prime time, and I kind of fell into that slot and believed it. I don't any longer. I don't believe it
And
at
you
all. And
shouldn't. And you
I've got
shouldn't.
some I've got some meetings coming up and some great phone calls that are scheduled for next week. And I actually have a production that I've been working on for the last 2 years, and I've got some great talent already signed to it. I've got Jonathan Banks and Perry Reeves and myself and a couple others that are looking at this show idea that I
Mm-hmm.
have, and I've already got 25 shows outlined and ready to go, and it's exciting. It's
Well, I believe
exciting
you
to
have, you
be
have to
out
take
there.
you have to take your destiny into your own hands. I mean, I don't ever really believe it
Right.
in the sense of agents. I say, you know, like you, it's because it's the one thing that I you know have seen a lot of actors in the early stage. Because even when people go like they go to my resume, they're like, "Is there anything you haven't done?" And I'm like, when I figure out what's not on the list, I'll put it there because I look at the end of the day, you know, you have to package yourself as a brand. You can't expect someone else who
Hmm.
doesn't really look at you in the way that you want to be looked at. You got to create your own opportunities. You can't sit around
Yeah.
waiting for someone to open the door. And I've never been that person. I believe with you, like your talent, your skill. But I think, and we talked about this even before. Where I was like, why weren't you doing in the early stages like more appearances? And you were like, well, they didn't really. And I was like, you have the one of the most iconic, popular characters of all time. I mean, literally to me, and as I said, because Eric's a good friend of mine, like I really only when you think of to me when you think of Y&R and you think
Hmm.
of legacy and you think of longevity and you think of iconic names per se in the business, you got Victor Newman and you got Sheila Carter. Like they're two different spectrums, but they're synonymous in the way like where Eric is ruthless as Victor in business, but again, misunderstood. Kimberlin, ruthless in everything, but again, misunderstood. And to me, when you have such a power player like you, I mean, did you not want to capitalize, or even when they were like, you know, you said they weren't, you know, and that's going to change that, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to go on tour. Me and her, we're going to go some city. We're going to come out. We're going to meet you guys somewhere this summer. We just got to figure out a date and when and time and we're going to make it happen. But like, did you ever speak up and say like, wait a minute, I should be maybe in the forefront here and being part of this conversation of why you're not putting me out there when look at the numbers, look at the fan base.
Yeah, I actually had that conversation. An agency that I was with, I was living in Vegas at the time, and one of my agents asked if he could have dinner with me. He flew to Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm leaving the agency. And he said, there's just a couple things that you need to know. And he said, Kimberlin, I've had so many things come down the pipe for you. And this other person who owned the agency basically squashed it. And you need to know that because I think you need to find somebody else. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, you're a regular paycheck. You're a sure
Mm-hmm.
deal. You
Mm-hmm.
pay the rent, you pay the lights, you pay, you know, the salary for the receptionist. He said they're afraid to put you onto something else um, because they don't want to lose that paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I also say, you know, those people out there struggling and trying to find their way. If something is stagnant, you really need to question
Mm-hmm.
why. And I would question why, and my answers were always the same. Oh, they're just not interested in you. You know, they say you do daytime. And I'm finding out now that I've learned that there were people interested in me.
Hmm.
And I'm just hoping and praying that, you know, they still will be.
I mean,
Um,
I'm gonna be real with you. I mean, there was a time when, and again, I don't know who, what's the word I want to use, cock blocked, but like, there was a time I wanted to bring you on something, and it was like, yeah, it's not interesting. I was like, why the hell wouldn't you be? I don't know
I,
who that person was, but I have a feeling I know who it is. But but again, I started to see this because the way that I was bringing, like for example, when I started touring, it was originally just me and Shamar, and then it crossed over to me, Shamar, Sean, and Daniel Goddard, and we would hit cities and do different appearances and things of that nature.
right.
And a lot of times, well, same thing. People would say, well, they don't really care about soaps, but because of the way that I do business and the way that I negotiate, I make sure I have the right players. Because again, we know it's not the '90s. This is not New York City where people are running into the streets going crazy over daytime stars anymore. But if you have people that are willing to make, because I mean I know when the shows do their fan events, and I've talked to fans, and I was like, look, what's the difference between you guys going to that and going to something that I'm doing? And they go,
Hmm.
we actually walk away feeling like we know the people. Where if we're in the Y&R fan events or the B&B fan events or whatever, it's sort of like a high and by, quick sort of interaction, and you don't really get to know that character or be able to ask the questions. And I always say, I'm like, you know what? Like I would tell the guys when I on tour, I was like, look, even if no one knows you, even if they don't watch soaps, as
Hmm.
long as you make that fan feel like they walked out of there with something memorable, they'll come
Hmm.
back every time, and they will support you going forward, even if they didn't know you. And that's where I'm like, I looked at, I was like, all the times I was trying to reach out and get your hopes, I was like, why is she not like? This doesn't make any sense because I looked at you, and I think and this is where I wanted to ask you is that like, was it your choice when you would come on YNR or come on B&B? They put you in a storyline, and then it would just end, and then Sela would be presumed dead or whatever and disappear. Did you like the fact that you were sort of like a franchise player, like you were brought in like an MVP, like bottom of the ninth, and you're like, oh, when we're slow, let's bring back Kimberlin. Did you like that aspect for your character? Was it your choice in making those decisions to walk away in those times, or would you have rather been a player being there every day where maybe your character may have gotten stale?
Well, personally, I don't think my character ever would become stale because I wouldn't let that happen. But no, it was difficult. It was difficult knowing that you just signed a 3-year contract, and 6 months later, they were telling you that your story was done. So that was definitely not my choice.
Mm-hmm.
And Dee, when you would call and ask if I was available to do appearances and things like that, those messages never got to me,
Wow.
ever.
Wow. And that was a
Yep.
lot. Trust me. I still have the things on my phone. Because I remember I looked at the phone. I was like, because it was like, I remember, and it was a good, and I was like, I'm like, can we even have a conversation? So
No.
I could even like, because what was happening was, and this is
I had
like even,
I had people screening on my behalf that I never even authorized to do that. So it's
and you're not the first person that's told me that, but it's pissed me off because and it goes back to what the point you were saying, where when someone sees opportunities for you that can pay the rent, pay the bills, because the way I look at it, when I started doing them, because I ran nightclubs for years and I still had those connections even when I went out of the business, and people always say like, hey, you know what, like I have a venue, I have a place, like we want to do something, and I was like, and sometimes I would just show up there, and then eventually I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing this for free. Like, let me turn this into a
right.
business. So I realize with people like you, people like me, just like you went out to that Winer 50 event the other night. I'm sure there's people there you haven't seen in
Mhm.
years, because throughout the year, everyone's doing their thing. They got families, they're working. And I
Right.
was like, why are we only getting together once a year? So I'm like, if there's a way that we could do mini vacation, also make some money, can't be greedy, but again, we can do it on a consistent level.
Right.
I'll bring you guys every single time and vouch for you. You just got to do your part. You got to be able to make that fan feel an experience because, again, they will give you an opportunity. And what was happening was I would run into people like the daytime Emmys or whatever on the red carpet, like, oh, why did you bring me? And I was like, I did reach out to you. And either I would get no, or I would get